That's always the hardest part.
Charge?
That sounded like an attention horn. Just attention.
Yeah. Reveille? Revelry? I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the podcast. Fleeting Thoughts is the name, and words are the game, and we use words as weapons for our battle against the silence.
I got nothing.
I don't know. That was just off the top of my head. Anyway.
My brain was rapidly trying to find a way to coincide with that, and I didn't have anything.
It wasn't a good coincidence. So, Channing, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for welcoming me to my show.
Yeah, to your own show. Welcome to the show that has your name on it. My name is Joe, you're Channing, and this is Fleeting Thoughts.
It is.
Are you ready for this?
Theoretically.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a pretty good theory that it's happening right now.
It's true.
Could be real.
But what's reality? What's real?
Dude, I don't know. We could talk about it.
Oh, man. That's like a 3 to 4 year conversation, probably.
I'm pretty sure we've been trying to figure that out for about 1,000 years.
Just for forever, yeah.
Forever.
I just mean to try to talk about it would probably...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we could just come up with what we accept as reality, and then we would go from there. You don't have to, like, continually question your own existence to live life. I think you'd be a little...
You just fade away like Kyle in that episode of South Park where he... it was from like a few seasons ago, but he starts questioning his own existence and then questions it so much that he literally just fades out of reality.
Yeah. Well, cartoon characters can do that pretty easily. I was thinking about that I was watching Game of Thrones, and I was thinking about if I lived in a world like that, I would not be an atheist. I would not be a scientist. Like, you couldn't believe that anything you've witnessed is true because there's magic in the world. So at any point, magical things could happen and just completely flip the physics, completely change the way things work, and it would be a very different reality to live in a world where, magic, men come out of smoke and murder people. You would never be able to have it would just be a very chaotic perception of the world. You could be in that world. You could easily be in the mind of a magician, like, you know what I mean, because they have magicians that can alter the way you see things. And so I was just thinking about how, like, it would just be very I would just be a totally different person, obviously. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't at all be like rational. There would be no rationality to anything. It would be
statistically, you would be dead within like 2 episodes, probably.
Oh yeah, for sure, because it's Game of Thrones and everyone dies, and I would be a nothing because I'm totally not a soldier or anything.
Well, you might be in that particular
still dead.
Scenario.
Still quite dead. But yeah, what's going on?
Well, I'm here.
Yeah.
We're talking about Game of Thrones, apparently, just right off the bat.
I'm obsessed with Game of Thrones. So.
It's a decent thing to be obsessed with. There are worse things.
Definitely worse things.
You'd be obsessed with like Twilight or something. I don't think that's really a thing anymore. I think that fad finally died out. Hopefully.
Yeah, I don't hear much about it anymore. No more team this or that.
If you want to know what's in, just go to Hot Topic, and
that
just
true.
gives you an idea of what people are into right now.
I'm going to go undercover and learn about today's youth, and I'm going to start by going to Hot Topic and buying all the hip clothes, and I'm going to go to schools and say, "What up, yo?" I don't know if that's what people say anymore, but
I don't know either.
I think they just say YOLO and Bay a lot. I figured out what Bay means finally. B-E-A, I think is what it is. Do you ever see that around?
Yeah, well, I've heard it, but
it means before anything else, so it's B-A-E. And it's like a term of endearment.
So, but it's like an acronym for before anything else?
For those words.
Well, so if you call somebody a bae, what does
You're
that
calling
mean?
them the thing you put above everyone else.
Oh, okay.
It's a dumb
got it.
way to put it.
I don't know where I was thinking about that would have meant. I'm just like, wait, what?
I just been seeing it a lot.
I always thought it was
Twitter.
just like a somehow an even lazier way to say babe.
That's what I thought.
That extra B just
I thought it was like a
drags people
weird
down.
accented version of baby. Like, oh, bae. Oh, you little bae. Oh, you're just a little bee.
You're a little bee.
Little bee. But it's not. It's an acronym, just like everything else. So weird.
Maybe in 1,000 years, our whole language will just be acronyms. Because
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if we really continue with this kind of shortened, quick-paced text kind of, like texting and twittering kind of language, who knows in 1,000 years? I very much doubt we'll be engaging in the same type of communication we are now.
Probably not at all.
That would be weird.
But speaking of words,
it's
that time. What do you got this week?
I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and the guy used the word Brumous, Brumous, and it just means foggy, which it's a cool adjective. The atmosphere is brumous, or it's a literary term, so usually you would use it to describe a scene or something like that.
Yeah, it seems more literal, like
I was saying
through storytelling.
Literary.
Yeah, literary, instead of just
it's
you wouldn't just go outside and be like, God, it's so brumous out here. You
right.
Just say
it's not
foggy as shit.
Yeah, it's not a common term or anything, but definitely cool that you could use in a writing.
I'm totally going to use it now. I'll find a way to fit it in.
I think it sounds cool, and it makes sense. Brumous, like it sounds kind of dark and deep.
It sounds kind of foreign. Like I was saying before, it sounds like Brujas, which is like means witch.
Yeah. That's Spanish, right? Brujas?
Yes, I believe so.
It sounds like very negative connotation that you would say. You would like almost like you calling somebody a bitch or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, witches historically were not very respected people.
No. Yeah.
I mean, there was some minor burning at the stake and various other things.
A little minor burning.
On the subject of witches, my favorite one in terms of just how ridiculous it was is. It's to test if you're a witch or not was that they would tie stones to you and then throw you in the river. And then if you didn't drown, you were a witch. But if you did, you were human, but you're just dead now. So, sorry. That was just, I remember hearing about that like in high school and when we studied the Salem witch trials and they were talking about the different ways that they would test women. And I heard that one and I was like, well, that is just a no-win for everybody pretty much.
Yeah, I think you just would work really hard to not get on the possible witch list. Like, just do whatever you can to not deal with that kind of irrational testing. I don't think that makes any sense. What a terrible time to live in general, Just, I don't even think they had electricity. You're barely surviving, no medicine, and they thought anything that they didn't understand was the work of the devil. So, sort of a fearful life, I guess.
That's an interesting time. Did you ever read The Crucible?
No.
Arthur Miller play?
I think I saw the movie.
Yeah. With the Daniel Day-Lewis one?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really
pretty
good movie.
Yeah, it's a solid interpretation of the play.
And I had that one female actress who was really
Winona
good.
Ryder?
Yeah, Winona Ryder. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really good. I don't know why I watched that movie. It's so weird.
It's a weird movie to just watch randomly. I only watched it because we read the play in high school and then we watched the movie to see it.
Yeah, definitely an interesting occurrence in history. I don't know. I think that kind of stuff happens in different ways now. It's more of your social following gets destroyed because of your reputation or something. It's different. Anyway, like Iggy Azalea on South Park just has a huge butt that sings in the episode. That's our way of dealing with outcasts now. Just make fun of them.
Brumous, Brujas.
Brumous.
That's what you should title this episode.
This is Brumous.
Brumous, Brujas.
Foggy witches in 2 different languages. Hello. Anyway.
Spoken with a different accent. So
yes.
you really get
Russian.
3.
Hello. My Brumous Brujas. How are you? Anyway, what's your word? Little fucker?
Little fucker.
Oh, little fucker.
Little bee. Little bee fucker.
Oh, you're a little bee.
My word for the week is Philosophaster. Not philosopher, but something quicker.
Not the
like
Philosopher's Stone.
No.
The Philosophaster's
the Philosophaster.
fake stone.
Which is a person who has only a superficial knowledge of philosophy or who feigns a knowledge he or she does not possess For those listeners that may not know, feign means fake. Just throwing that out there.
Liar. Yeah. Essentially, somebody who it seems like a charlatan is another word for that. But in a more intellectual way, like they're trying to give you information to lead you down a road, possibly to manipulate you or get you to buy something or something. And somebody who convinces everyone that global warming's happening, and so they all go out and buy solar panels. Not saying that that's necessarily a lie, but if that were a lie, you would call someone a charlatan who's trying to sell those things using information in a lie.
Yeah, it's definitely a word that was used pretty frequently, it seems like, in the 1800s, at least in literature, because there's a couple books, The Reign of Greed by Charles Derbyshire, whoever that guy was.
Derbyshire.
New Foes with an Old Face in 1853 also used that quite a bit. So it was probably a word that just was very popular during that time, and then I had never heard it until I ran across it when I was reading some stuff up on philosophy, actually. It just
weird.
Popped up. And I thought it just was, obviously it's kind of related to philosophy in that it's people who pretend like they know things about it, but...
Well, philo, I think, is... right, Sophie, it means the love of wisdom, and I'm trying to remember the direct... the direct translation from the two parts of the word. I think philo is the wisdom part, and the Sophie is the love part.
Philosophy?
Philosophy. Hello. I'm just going back to my Russian accent with everything.
Have you been playing Metro lately? Because
no,
that's how they talk through the whole game.
I don't know where that comes from. It's just a fun accent, I guess.
What can I do for you?
Hello there. My name is Boris Bidofalot. That's a shout out to Justin Wesson if he ever listens to this. He came up with that a long time ago, and I thought it was hilarious.
So much so that it's made a comeback, so it's good.
Yeah, I've never forgot it.
It stood the test of time.
Anyway, Philosophaster is something you don't want to be. Don't be a liar.
But it's something that a lot of people are, unfortunately.
Oh,
I know.
Oh, what a world.
Oh, just really bringing down the whole vibe now.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll be all right. I'll do fine. Don't worry about that. I'm gonna do the whole fucking thing like that. I don't care about
that whole...
I'm gonna get really sore and talk like that too. Anyway, we're talking about books. I'm just gonna bring this up to start this off, and then you can say what you will about it. But I just started reading a book called "The Origins of War in Child Abuse." Let me get the writer. It's written by Lloyd DeMoss, and you can actually get a free audio version on freedomainradio.com. There's I downloaded it to my phone and started listening to it, and it's a really, really interesting book about how violence kind of perpetuates and occurs, and some of the... it starts off talking about the symbology or symbolism. I forget which word is correct. Boondock Saints ruined that for me. Symbolism, idiot. And it's about... so the first chapter is about the how a lot of countries, right before they go to war, a lot of female characters are drawn in and kind of idolized in certain ways, like pregnant mothers, and also violent mothers, and like devouring mothers. And he talks about a lot of different cultures and how this kind of similar theme happens in warlike states, and then like right before wars happen, a lot of art reflects this kind of like angry pregnant mother symbols. Really interesting. Obviously, go read the book, and then it starts talking about some of the differences between the way that boys and girls are parented, and talks about some of the different cultural differences in parenting styles that occurred throughout history. This guy, DeMoss, he has done a lot of research on psychohistory. It's called psychohistory, and it's essentially like how psychology and things change over in different historical periods, and how it relates to culture and things like that, and how you have like Freud, who interviewed a lot of people who had a lot of interesting things about that had to do with trauma and sexual abuse, and how different cultures kind of are. We've sort of progressed at this point to have like a lot of different standards when it comes to parenting and child rearing, that like in Western cultures nowadays, like sexual abuse and physical abuse has gone down, and there's a lot of new parenting styles in the way of like having men and women both share the responsibility. And so I'm only a few chapters in, but one of the things I learned was that boys and girls both have are born with different size corpus callosums, which is a part of the brain that connects the right and left hemispheres. And so I believe the right hemisphere is related to emotionality, and the left hemisphere tends to be related to rationality. And I could be mixing those up.
No, I think you're right, because the right side is typically the more artistic side, which would definitely be tied to the emotional aspect.
And so because boys are born and develop as they're growing, have a smaller connective tissue between the two hemispheres, it's actually harder for boys to deal with trauma. So things that are related to emotional issues, they have a harder time coming up with rational ways to deal with them. So they end up being more aggressive and more violent, because when neglect or trauma or abuse happens to a boy, they tend to get less attention from parents. And so what it shows is that little boys actually need more attention and empathy and loving kind of nature from their parents and their caregivers, because they don't have the necessary biological equipment to make up for the lack of care. You know what I mean? Like kind of just tenderness and all that, and explaining things and being there for them, and being connected to kind of a protective parent. And girls actually have a larger portion of this the portion of their brain that does this. So girls actually need, it's not that they need less, it's that they're better at kind of dealing with and coping with on their own any kind of stuff that happens as a child. And because boys need more of this, and yet boys actually get less of it on purpose. So it's in most cultures to give parents tend to give boys less eye contact, less attention, where a lot of boys are taught to not show emotion. So it's kind of this it's almost geared to make men violent, because of the way that the culture kind of expects to treat boys, in particular, be a man. And then it goes on to talk about like childhood play, and how girls have this kind of play and boys have this kind of play. And it kind of dispels some of the myths about testosterone being the reason men are more violent. There's studies that show that during wartime, testosterone levels actually go down in men, which doesn't support that at all.
Yeah.
And boys and girls have the same amount of testosterone up until the age of 8, but boys actually start to show more aggressive tendencies at the age of 4. So testosterone doesn't explain any of that. So anyway, it's a really good book. I haven't finished it yet, but already I'm kind of like really curious about how child rearing is so important to the development of children. He talks about empathy as well. I don't know. While I was listening to this book, I'm like, this is the most important book anyone could ever read, because it has to do with developing better, less violent, more peaceful societies. And if we could all just work toward making happier, better, not necessarily happier, but like more functional childhoods with using all of this science and studies that we've been doing for 50 to 100 years in psychology, that it would just lead to just like, there's so much peace that we could be having. I'm almost want to be violent about how much peace there could be if people were less, not that they necessarily like, it's about understanding that maybe you grew up with an abusive family, but you can do more with your child. You can stop that cycle of, violence begets violence by altering the way that you parent, or even just treat kids, or even just treat each other, or treat yourself, really. And starting with yourself is an important. You can't, you shouldn't be having children if you're, going to lead to all this abuse. Like if a mother, he was talking about how if a mother has been, like in a lot of cultures, like genital mutilation, abuse, sexual abuse, if she's gone through all of that and then she has a child, how could you expect her to be a loving, caring, wonderful mom when she's gone through all of that trauma and that abuse? And so anyway, I just wanted to mention it's a very impactful book. So
I'm curious. I might download that and listen to it. That seems very interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, we can go on from there. I just wanted to really, I have been excited to explain some things that I've learned in this book.
What was the title of it one more time?
It's called The Origins of War in Child Abuse. Okay. I don't know when it was written, but it's got some, pretty recent, a lot of study, a lot of research involved in the book. And I'm only 3 chapters in, and I've already, kind of
it seems
been
like you've already learned a lot just within that small amount.
Yeah. He talks about alters and how we have this kind of mechanism in the amygdala that encapsulates and separates really negative traumatic emotions and kind of turns it into an alter personality of which we can use to, when we kind of engage in violent or negative behavior, we kind of access this alter behavior, and then it allows us to kind of switch back and forth between, because we kind of it's like a coping mechanism for trauma, is you create this alternate self inside of your brain, inside of the fear center of your brain, and it kind of takes over that part, and then it kind of gets re-engaged anytime you're going through fear or trauma again, and then it kind of so it can be like your inner parent or your inner abuser or this kind of alternate self. But this is like what he's going to get into is like these kind of trance events where you don't necessarily remember and you don't feel guilty about these violent acts you engage in because you're actually kind of an alternate self at that point. It's a weird split personality kind of thing that I'm just learning about.
Like the beginnings of what can develop into like a split personality disorder.
Right. And it explains some psychoticism and some like even schizophrenia is like hearing voices in your head. And we all have voices in our head. It's just whether or not you think they're you, whether or not you can differentiate between things other people have said to you. And, we internalize almost, everything that's important to us. So anyway, this is just some interesting factoids. That's
awesome. That's crazy.
Interesting stuff I've been learning about related to self-knowledge, which we were all talking about on our last podcast.
Last couple, actually.
Yeah,
so our little intro and then
right,
part of it
for
last time.
So anyway, anything you'd like to share with the class? Anything you've been thinking about lately, or
well, I've just been thinking about
researching
self-knowledge in general, just to chat about it a little bit this time around. For me personally, actually, I know last time you talked a lot about your own personal experiences and stuff. So I've been thinking about it. I actually have a notebook that I was taking notes on and stuff, and it's been interesting, actually, just like it's almost been more going back and dissecting my childhood from a different perspective and looking at myself as like a third party, like a separate person, like evaluating myself, I guess. It's kind of a weird way to put it, I guess, but
that's what you do when you
you have to almost take emotions out of it and just look at it for what it is. But I don't even know where to start, but I was never abused, luckily, as a child. I was like spanked, which I guess is a form, but never like to severity where I feel like I was traumatized by it. It was more of shouldn't do that anymore, otherwise I'll get swatted on the ass.
Okay.
However, I just upon thinking about it a lot, I realized that how unstable my childhood was, and that we always were moving around a lot. I don't ever really remember being anywhere for longer than like maybe a year growing up. Like we moved around a lot. And I think it just has a lot to do with my mom never just, I feel like I know she had a really rough childhood, that she was abused in multiple ways. And so I think that she always felt uncomfortable sticking around anywhere for too long. It was just maybe weird for her. And I don't think that she's never been very good with relationships. And so that was part of why we moved around a lot too, is that her relationships would begin and end, and we would just end up in different places. And I don't want to delve too much into it. I'm sure she doesn't want the whole world to know about her life. But basically, it just caused us to move around a lot. And
can I ask you something real quick to interrupt? Was that because you were living with a man? Like she would shack up with someone for a while, and then you would leave, and then she'd shack up with someone. Was that why you were moving, or was it because you were like living in a car, or was it? Because
no, we were never living in a car.
I'm just curious. What is the we weren't even sense of moving around? Like, state to state, or was it like just?
I know when I was like really young, we'd move state to state because the man that she was with was actually my brother's biological father. He was in the military, which is why we moved around a lot then. But I can't even. It wasn't like she was like some kind of slut that was just like a floozy hopping around from guy to guy or anything. I just making it clear for for everybody else that I don't want to make it sound like she was like this loose woman or something. But there were even times that we would just like it. I just never remember staying anywhere for very long. We would move. And what's weird is that even when we lived somewhere for a while, she would move the house around a lot. It was like she always was changing things around all the time. And I don't know if it's because she was just bored and it was just something that she could kill time with, or if she was just doing it for some other reason. I just remember her, like, even if we stayed in the house for a while, she would always be rearranging like bedrooms in the living room, like, sometimes every couple of months she would just, change things around for whatever reason. And so, but with like moving around, I just remember never being able to make friends because I just didn't know how long I was really even going to be. Like I wouldn't even spend most years of schooling. I wouldn't even spend in one school. Like I would go to like 2 or 3 almost different schools sometimes. And so it led to just me not even like at a certain point, I just remember not even trying to make friends anymore because I just always felt like I was going to be leaving again soon anyway. And so, it almost, I feel like I created almost like an emotional detachment to everything. Like I always was just, and I would never try to get involved in anything. I would just I just wanted to be in the shadows in the back. Like I didn't want to get attached to anything. I didn't really want people to notice me at all. And so, like growing up, I just remember like I never wanted to do any extracurricular activities, anything like that, even though everybody was like, oh, you should, it's good. I just wanted to, go to school, get through classes. I was always good at school. I always got great grades. It was just easy for me to just like, I think it was because I was so unfocused in making friends. I would focus all my efforts into schoolwork. Even like on lunch breaks, I would just sit in the library and do my homework or something. And then when I would go home, I would just, play video games or read or whatever. So all my activities, even outside of school, were just me being by myself doing stuff. And, I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, it's just like
instability can definitely take a toll. I'm curious, typically when it seems like when kids are in an unstable living environment that usually they don't do very well in school. So I'm wondering if did you get encouragement from like when you did well on tests, and did you have any teachers that were kind of like helping you, or that you remember being particularly encouraging, or did you like bring tests home and your parents were excited about that? I'm just curious what did you just get like an intrinsic motivation out of it, or you just like it was like hard work, you would get it done, you got your own little, like it just was personal to you? I'm just curious.
I think it was a little bit of personal, but I think it was because I was always raised that getting good grades is a great thing, which I think is what most people are raised with. But I remember, like, my mom was always very supportive, and she would, like, when I came home from school, she'd be like, oh, well, you know, what homework do you have to do? And then she would make sure that we got it done before we did anything else. Then I always got huge praise, like, whenever I got good grades.
Good.
And I mean, as far as teachers, I mean, I've just had so many of them. I don't remember any being like amazing or any of them being really bad. So I mean, I think it was just it was something that I understood that if I did well at it, it would keep me out of trouble. And I felt like even at a young age, I understood like the value of what I was learning. That I knew that it was going to be helpful for my future, and so I just wanted to learn as much as I could. And it just always came easy to me. I never really struggled that much with schoolwork. It just made sense to me, and so
that's great.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Yeah, well, that's obviously a good thing to be able to work on, you know, your own skills and your own education, and regardless of what school you went to, you know, that seems really difficult to go, you know, from one teacher to another teacher, you know, and to not have a consistent kind of basis. You're just kind of like learning whatever anyone puts in front of you, if that makes sense, which is, you know, obviously part of education system tends to be kind of like, here's some shit, you know, read it, do it, test it, boom, you're done.
Yeah, I mean, the only time it was ever difficult was when we ended up moving. I was like, it was in elementary school, but we moved to Las Vegas, and their curriculum was just completely different from what I was doing in Oregon. And so I remember being kind of tricky because it wasn't that it was more advanced. It was just so much different than what I was already doing. So I almost had to just relearn some things and like catch up to the rest of the class. Which that was the only time I remember it just being kind of funky, where I like went to this class and they were studying things that I had not seen yet.
Yeah, that can be difficult for sure, because I think different curriculums have different developmental standards, so they kind of like expect you to know this by this age, and if you come from a totally different standard set, you could be either really ahead in something or really behind in something. And
I remember
they don't necessarily know what you've been doing.
Like the math was, they were really a lot further ahead. Like they were already, you know, deep into, I think it was like fourth grade, because they were already like really deep into multiplication tables and all that stuff. Where I'd come from, they just started kind of teaching that to us. But I remember like the reading and writing was just a lot less like intensive than it was at the school I'd come from. So it was like I was already ahead of the game as far as like the writing and reading, but then I had luckily already had a foundation for some of the math, but then I had to like kind of catch up and learn that really fast. But I mean, as far as all that goes, it basically, as far as like the self-knowledge aspect of it, it makes me realize how, like, why I probably don't attach myself to hardly anybody anymore, is that I just detach myself emotionally when I'm having conversations with people that I don't think I'm probably going to see again, or that I just assume aren't going to be important in my life at all. And so it's hard for me to like make friends and stuff, because I don't really feel like I had that social, I just didn't learn that much about social interaction growing up, because I just kind of removed myself from it entirely. And I got made fun of a lot in school too. I was like an overweight kid, so some schools I went to, people make fun of me for being a little fat kid, and so that didn't help at all.
Well,
either.
And that you're a loner. You don't have any protection. You don't have other people. You don't have a background. You don't have a reputation. You can there's just some random new kid in school, and these little horrible people are like, let's point this kid out. Really, it didn't matter what you look like. Probably they would have just pointed you out, because really, they were probably insecure about things too. So yeah, that sucks. That's no fun. I'm sorry to hear that. That sucks.
Well, I'm all right now, but yeah, and then it also surprises me too that I'm able to have such a successful marriage so far too. Like I never really discussed like my feelings about anything to anybody at all. Not that like nobody ever tried. I just never wanted to. Like my mom, like if she could tell I was upset about something, she would try to ask me, and I just never would talk about it. I guess I didn't really ever see the point in it. I don't know. Like I just didn't think that talking about it was going to matter. I would just need to grind it out for another day and just kind of drift through.
Right. Like, well, I mean, did anyone ever ask you if it was okay? Like, I mean, that's a stupid question, but really, I mean, the moving around, the instability, the leaving your friends, the not getting friends, has a major effect on people. And did your mom ever explain what was going on and what could happen and how this was, for a particular reason, or was it just this is what's happening? So, you know what I mean? Like, does that make any sense as a question?
Yeah, no, it does. I don't think so. I think that my mother, as far as like moving or her relationship issues, I think she always just tried to hide them from my brother and I, like in the hopes that if we weren't subjected to it, that it wouldn't affect us so much. Like if she could just kind of...
Did you think you wouldn't notice that you were packing up your bags, moving around to different places, and after a while you probably stopped asking?
Yeah, it just became... It just became unsurprising at a certain point.
Right.
But I mean, I remember just like seeing her crying, and like when I think that she didn't think that we were looking, and it like I remember it hardened me in the sense that I had to take care of my brother more. Like for a long stretch of time, she had like 2 jobs to support us because she was a single mother and had to keep a roof over our head and pay bills and all that stuff. And so I had to like raise him on top of everything else that's going on in a kid's life. But and that also kind of led into not really having friends, because it was like I would go to school and then have to come home and help take care of my brother, and then she would call and check on us and make sure everything was okay whenever she could. But I think that she just tried to hide it a lot to just like not make us experience it. And
I think it was probably more to do with her hiding it from herself, because if she has to sit there and explain it to a child that is affected by it, then she has to admit that it's having an effect, that she has to admit that it's not good. You know what I mean? Like, of course, she probably felt like maybe she was doing what was good for her, but she knew that it was taking a toll on you guys, and that's probably more difficult if you have to sit down your child and look them in the eye and say, hey, mommy doesn't know how to deal with men, and I have to move around. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just thinking, it was more like an avoidance, for her own sake. Because it would have been better for you guys if she was honest with you, if she cried in front of you and explained what was going on. Then you would have some more understanding about the situation. Oh, my mommy's sad. I want her to be happy, so this is why we move around a lot. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know if I don't want to tell you your experience, but you know what I mean?
It's like you were there.
I just, I'm just trying to understand what that's like, because my parents were together for 20 years, and I wish they had been separated for my whole life. So I was really happy when they got divorced. I literally, like, it was like a weight off my shoulders when my parents got divorced. And I remember like even to this day, I'm still told by my dad that it's like I'm a child of a divorce. I'm a child of divorce. Like the divorce is what was the negative aspect of our childhood. The marriage was the negative aspect of our childhood. It was the yelling and the screaming and the fighting and the lack of explanation, the lack of stability that we had from all of that. Like, I mean, we kind of lived in the same house, but the house was not always the same. It was always, it was always this kind of like, what's going to happen next? It was very, tumultuous, childhood that I experienced because of their marriage. So to me, the divorce was the best thing that was possible. It was like, finally, these people who don't get along won't be around each other and not yell at each other. That just makes sense, But anyway,
for me, it just made me afraid to develop an emotional relationship with anybody, because all I would think to myself is, why am I going to do this when it's just going to end horribly, And so I just remember a lot of times I would just shut my emotions off and just drift through the day. Like I would just try to fade into the back and then just make it through the day to the next day and hope that it got better at a certain point. Sure. But like I said, I mean, like I was never hit or anything. It was just my dad was fucking absent for a majority of my childhood. And then even when I did see him, he was so busy with his own personal agenda that I would just end up sitting around his house by myself. And so I just had no attachment to him at all, really. Sure. And then he would always be confused why I never wanted to talk to him or anything. And it's just like, how can you not fucking figure that out, fella?
Yeah.
But
were they married, your mom and dad?
No, okay. They were. My mom was like 17 when she got pregnant with me, but they never got married or anything. Actually, they weren't even really. I think they were together briefly after I was born, but they never got along. They had like this kind of weird teen love-hate relationship, I think. They've always been really good friends. Like even to this day, they still call each other and chat and stuff. They just were never, I guess, good together in like a loving relationship. They were always just better off as just friends. So I mean, luckily for me, I didn't have to deal with that aspect. Like kind of how you were talking about how your parents fought, and they were in a terrible relationship together. My parents' relationship was fine, but they just weren't together. They were just friends. So I would just go to my dad's like every other weekend. I would have to go to his house just to visit with him and stuff. Yeah, sort of. So I never had to deal with any kind of like weird arguments or anything like that. So
yeah. Well, I guess it kind of I don't know. It seems weird that they were teenagers. He got her pregnant, and then they probably argued a lot because they probably didn't really want to be around each other that much. Yeah. And then she has you, and then he's like, well, blah, 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 kid. And then that's just very, like the lack of forethought in all of that is
I was totally accidental. My mom even said that she was like on birth control when I was conceived. Like they definitely did not. It wasn't the planned thing at all. So,
yeah.
But I don't know. But
yeah. Well, it's hard to feel. I don't want to be too negative here, but it's hard to feel. It's hard to feel wanted from that particular situation. And then when your mom asks you what's wrong, and you feel like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
What would it matter if I told you that what's wrong is that, my dad is fucking nobody, and I don't. Why did you? Well, you know what I mean? Like, if you actually brought if you actually told her, you'd still move around. She'd still go from here to there. She'd still be gone all the time. You'd still be taking care of your brother. So your emotions didn't matter. Your thoughts on the matter. You know what I mean? Like, I can see why you wouldn't have, like, any power to, like, so it's nice that she asked, but what... Does it really matter what your opinions are?
That's what I mean. I feel like she always wanted to be there and always wanted to care, but just didn't know how to do it. Like my grandfather is a piece of shit. I mean, he's
her dad.
Yeah, he's not a nice guy. He's terrible to even her today. And so I think that she didn't have a very supportive upbringing. I know my grandmother had a lot of alcohol issues, and so I know my mother's upbringing was awful. And so I think that she always wanted to do better than how she received, but just didn't know how. Like she ends up with a kid unexpectedly, and then is just doing, she's trying not to do what her parents did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's also just emotionally fucked from her.
Yeah. It's almost like a overcompensation. So instead of being like, an abusive, alcoholic, yeller, screamer, bad relationship, she did the opposite, which is just staying busy with work and other men and moving around and not really kind of. If your goal is to not abuse someone, but you don't know how to love someone, then it's hard to. You just end up neglecting them because you'd rather just leave them alone than project all that negative stuff that you had. I can see that as an oblivious kind of notion, like, oh, I'll just stay busy. I'll just work and they'll just, I won't be like my parents. And she probably wasn't like her parents.
No, I don't think she was at all.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know. I've always just put my nose to the grindstone and just moved forward all the time.
Yeah.
Like that's just how I remember my childhood was just dealing with things as they came, not just turning my emotions off because they didn't matter, and then just going forward, which I think it helped with schoolwork and stuff because it kept me preoccupied.
Yeah.
And but I even do that to this day. Like I feel like if I'm not moving forward with something, then I just get really unhappy. Like I have to just always I have to like have a new goal and then work towards it, and then when I get there I have to just set another one and go towards it. Which I'm getting to this point in my life where it's like I'm not in school, which was always something that you're always just like working to do a good job and get good grades so you can move further. So now it's like I put so much energy and passion into writing because that's like that's the only way that I feel like I can move forward is by just like writing a new story, and then once I'm done with it, I just have to move on to the next one. Like I just feel like I guess I feel rushed, like almost that I have to just like get to the next thing and then get to the next thing and then and just not look back at all. I just have to keep going forward all the time with everything. And if I ever feel like I'm just complacent or I'm like sitting at a standstill, I start getting really depressed for whatever reason. It's pretty weird.
Well, I know the reason. The reason is you never got to sit still. You never got to be stable. You never got to feel the kind of calm that comes from, just living in a home and everyone, kind of has a routine and you just do things. And, if you're always moving around, then you have to distract yourself from the reality of the fact that you have no idea what the future holds. So in order to control your environment, you have to control only what you can set and achieve yourself. You can, if you're always looking forward at your own goal setting, then you're never looking back at what's happened to your life, and you're never acknowledging the present, which is the depression and the fear and anger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's how we deal with emotions is we neglect them or repress them through distractions like getting A's, writing books, video games. Because that's what, like, goal seeking in video games. I was just thinking about how I'm like, RPGs are so amazing because there's never an end goal. Like, there's always more goals. There's always more missions. There's always more to upgrade. Like, that's why when you get to Skyrim and you get to level 100 and everything's at 100 and you're just like, what am I going to do with my life? I've done everything. So when you're doing all that, you don't have time to reflect. You don't have time to sit and think and ponder and cry and be fucking sad because that's all fucking superficial. You know what I mean? I don't mean to. That's how I feel a lot, is that, like, if you're not stable and you don't have the kind of connection to the reality of the situation, then you just distract yourself. You just think of other things and other people's issues, and you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think I know exactly why you can't sit still. You can't sit still because you couldn't sit still. You were never allowed to. There was no way to. Yeah. But so I wouldn't. That's going to be a tough thing to deal with because you're married. You don't get to just move around and do whatever the fuck you know what I mean? You don't get to recreate that in your life now. And so you have, these accomplishments. But
I'm in a very weird place in my life right now because I'm at that point where it's like I'm kind of where I'm at, and how we've kind of talked about, like, recently, how I'm just like, this is all there is. Like, and it's terrifying to me. Like, it makes me depressed to think that this is it. Like, I've kind of hit the end of the road, which I haven't. I mean, obviously I still have like tons of years ahead of me, hopefully, and like a lot of other things to do. But it's like now it's to the point where if I'm not writing and doing that, then it's like horrifying for me. And but yeah, it's just, and I'm trying to like learn to deal with accepting. Like, I mean, we just got our own place, but before we were even moving around a lot too, because we had, she was in school and we had roommates, and then roommates would come and go, and then we're moving to compensate for all that. And now it's just the two of us finally, and we have our own place, and it's just weird. Like, I feel like I just can settle into this place, but I don't know how. Yeah. But it's I don't know. I feel lucky that I've maintained such a good relationship with my wife, because I was always afraid to get into relationships because I saw what my mom had gone through, and so I feel like I've always put a lot of extra work into it to make sure that doesn't happen. Like, I try to be very understanding, and the moment that there's like a problem, I immediately just want to figure out how to solve it and not let it linger around.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did your mom ever get married?
Yeah.
How many times?
She's about to end her sixth marriage. Wait, I think it's the fifth one. Oh, I feel really bad.
Oh,
between
5 and 6, it does not matter at this point.
Yeah,
it might as well be 100. But not to disparage her name. I'm just saying,
I know, that's why I'm just
ultimately, that's a lot of marriages. Yeah. That's a lot of failed marriages, is what that is. That's, if your goal is to, get married, which is supposed to be lifelong, and it doesn't end up that way, then you did something wrong. You know what I mean? Either you did something terribly wrong, or the other person did, or you both did. So something happened there. So I just think that's it's interesting that you got married at a very young age, and it seems like the opposite of what somebody would do if their parent got married a lot. They would just, that's what you were saying, you're kind of surprised that happened. I mean, why do you think you got married so young, or was it kind of like a way to do what your mom couldn't do, which is to have a successful marriage? So you found somebody that you love and that you're committed to, and you're like, I'm gonna fucking do this, right? Is that
I think that is part of it. I mean, that's how I think about it sometimes, is that I refuse to
lose,
to let our marriage fail. But Vanessa's one of the first people in my life that I've really emotionally connected with. Because, like I said before, I just have always had trouble connecting with people, because I just didn't. I mean, it didn't seem like it was worthwhile, and so I feel like it was a lot of repressed emotions and interactions that I always wanted to have with people, but I just never did, and then they all kind of got put into her.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, and so I think that, and a lot of stuff happened to us in high school that just kind of really put us together. I mean, she was kicked out of her home when she was 18 and ended up moving in with me. And then, I don't know, I think that both of us are just so stubborn, and we don't like to quit, and we're not afraid to, like I said, anytime we've ever had an issue, we're both reasonable enough to recognize that there's a problem and that we just need to talk it out. And I think that we also understand that no marriage is like sunshine and lollipops all the time. You have to, there's just going to be days where you're at each other's throats because you're both in a shitty mood, and so you just, you leave each other alone, and then you go back and apologize to each other later, and discuss the issue if the one still persists.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's similar to how my mom was. Her upbringing was so shitty and abusive, and then when she raised my brother and I, she wasn't abusive at all, and was always trying to ask us how our day was, and try to be involved as best she could. And so I think that now I'm seeing all of her these marriages and failed relationships she's been in, and I'm just so adamant about not going down that same path. And then as far as having kids, luckily Vanessa isn't really interested in it, because having the idea of having children it's exciting, because I think we all have that natural desire to have offspring, because that's how we're designed biologically. But it's so terrifying to me, because I don't know how I would. I would be the person that would be reading books and listening to all this stuff, because I just wouldn't want to fucking fail at it, basically.
Sure. Well, that's the contradictory nature of smart people and procreation, or not smart people, but people who really want to understand themselves, and then what they would provide to a child or something. Like you were saying, I don't want to have a kid because I would be the kind of person who would read all these books and get really nervous about it, and you know what I mean? You take it so seriously, but that's exactly what people should do. You know what I mean? That's my big thing is I don't want to have kids because I think the same thing. I'm not ready to have kids. I don't know about myself. I'm a mess. I can barely take care of myself. I don't mean financially, but as far as really understanding what it takes to grow up, be mature, be healthy, understand the world. I'm just barely grasping any of that stuff. So how would I create a child? What would I do with a child? And it's just all this work and so much pressure and responsibility. But it's the person who recognizes the responsibility and the hardship that it would take, and who would do the research, who would read all the books that that should be having kids. But those are the people who have fought so hard to deal with their own childhoods that they don't want to put another child through that. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that, kind of like the people who think that life is all, it's just the way it is, or like like, it's hard to, like, I don't want to talk shit about every other human on the earth, but like people who just have kids and they, it was just an accident or whatever bullshit they want to tell themselves. And they do no research. They do no like therapy. They don't try to deal with their own major baggage so that they don't sit there and just poison their child. Those are the ones who shouldn't have kids, but they're the ones who are procreating at fucking retarded levels. And then you have the people who are like thoughtful and caring and patient and really work on changing their own nature. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones who should have them, but they end up not.
Yeah.
You know, like with intelligence, statistically, I believe, like people are having, like they tend to have kids later and less kids the more intelligent they are. So it's just like a really shitty stereotype that like just, you know, these, it's not that they have to be dumb. It's that they don't really think about the consequences of having kids and what that's going to bring to the child and the world ultimately, you know, because that's kind of what you're doing when you have a kid is you're saying, I want the world to be like this, right? If you have a kid and you neglect them, then you say, I want to live in a world where kids are neglected. Mm-hmm. It may not sound like that to people, but that's what I think. I think you're
it's true, yeah,
creating the world with children.
Child is the future. I mean,
yeah.
So how you
Their
raise
decisions.
it and what you do is what determines how the world is going to be.
Yeah. So
that makes sense to me. I think that people like that just don't think that far ahead or think that much into it. I think a lot of people have the kid, whether they wanted to or not, and then it's like getting a fucking puppy. You're like, it's cute, it's adorable, it's gonna be so much fun to play with. You think about all these amazing positive things, but then you don't think about, I gotta potty train it. I gotta, you know, I have all this training and things I gotta teach it. And I think people approach children the same way. They look at the bright side, like, I'm gonna have this beautiful baby.
They kind of objectify it.
And then they realize how much work they really have to put into it. And I think a lot of people just aren't really committed to doing that. They're just like, well, I'm just gonna try to keep it alive because I don't want to go to jail. And you know, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. I think a lot of what happens is that the minute you have a kid, you start to the parental alters in your brain that taught you what it was like to be a kid, right? So you were a kid, you were treated a certain way. Those alters start to come out when you have a kid, and you start to have these subconscious kind of coping mechanisms that come up. And then you start to do what your parents did because that's the model you have in your head. Mm-hmm. You have this model in your head of what happened, how children are treated. And so what happens is you just start to go into autopilot and you start to do things that your parents did or your caregivers or whatever. And so if they didn't, you know, provide all this nurturing and loving and, you know, touch and eye gaze and it's called attachment. Attachment is very important for functionality as an adult, is to be attached to a caregiver, as in like literal attachment, as in like holding, hugging, kissing, touch. Touch for babies is essential. Like they did this study in Russia or something. Actually, it wasn't a study. It was just an occurrence in an orphanage where after this war, there were just tons of babies in this orphanage. And the nuns taking care of them, or the people taking care of them, would feed them and give them water, but they didn't touch them, and the babies would die. Because the babies need to know that the world knows they exist. They need to know that the world cares about them.
That's weird.
Or they fucking die.
Yeah.
Even monkeys, they've done studies on monkeys because you're allowed to experiment in horrible ways with monkeys. The monkeys that were not touched or they were only given food and water as babies, that when they grew up, they would grow up to be much more aggressive and violent. This was actually part of that book too. They talk about that. So it's like there's this very real kind of need for a baby, but when somebody has a kid, they don't instinctually know all of this stuff. What they know is what they learned, what they experienced, and how they view the world. And then subconsciously, all this stuff comes out. I think when you have a kid, and a lot of fears, a lot of anxieties, you end up treating the child a lot like either your parents treated you, or like how you kind of treat them like your parents. It's a weird phenomenon that I'm just learning about, so I don't really know how to explain it. But like essentially, like a lot of people would describe their kids as tyrannical, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
What you're really talking about is you're projecting the nature of your parents onto the child, and you're starting to have this kind of dissociated relationship model where things get swapped, and now you're like a baby again, and the child becomes the parent in this weird kind of lack of knowledge. Like, I mean, you really don't know how you are, so you just, all this stuff starts happening, and your model of how to have a relationship with the child just changes and things. I don't know everything about it. It's like a psychological kind of concept that I've only recently started to learn about. But you know, in trying to figure out what it would be like to be a parent, I'm like, oh man, there's a lot to think about. There is.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like punishment. There's like there's all these different things, and there's like spanking, and there's punishing, and there's circumcision, and there's just a million things that you really need to look into and think about, and try to provide this kid with just the best environment that they can have, because the environment is the only thing you have control over. At all. Like we can't control our genes completely, like at all from birth, and then there are only minor things we can do throughout our lives to help our genetic material. But the environment we have way more control over. So it's an important thing to look at, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but I think people definitely get fucked up when they have a kid, and without a lot of self-knowledge, I don't think you can be all the parent that you could be. Like, you might have a kind of generic idea of what you don't want to do, but what do you want to do? What kind of a person are you going to put into the world? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's an important question that people should ask themselves, as well as taking responsibility for the fact that you did have them and they had no choice. They did not choose to do it. They're not a burden on you. You fucking made them.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's like buying a car and then being upset that you need to put gas in it. Like, fucking duh. Like, get over yourself.
Comes with the territory.
Don't be that person who's that oblivious to that fact. But anyway, I don't know if you want to continue.
That's probably good.
Okay.
It's a good look in the window.
Yeah.
But no, like I said, since we started talking about it, I just have been thinking about it and reflecting on it a lot. And you just kind of start with the general things that you do now, and then when you ask the question of why do I do that, or why do I think that way, you just have to follow it back to like a point and try to figure out what happened along the way. Which is true for everybody. I mean, we're all just products of our upbringings and cultures and things like that. So until you start to question it, you're just a robot. You're just living by the momentum and programming of your past behaviors and your environment that led to it. So I think it's important to take control. Take a little bit of and that way you can take responsibility and all that. It can be it's very emotional to really think, because when you really start delving into it, you just I've like found myself almost on the verge of tears just thinking about it. And it's just because it's like you've ignored it for so long that it's just like festered in the back of your mind, and until you like open that door and start really looking in there. Absolutely. Well, that's the thing about it, is like you want to look back on it in a somewhat objective way, just so that you can get to those memories. But once you get to the memory of your longing for connection, then you become emotional. And if you continue to repress that emotion, then you're not actually progressing in the realm of positive development, right? So unless you actually do break down and cry and do admit that these were kind of wrongs that were inflicted on you, and then you can kind of give your the people who wronged you responsibility for that, and take a little bit of the
the responsibility off yourself. Like instead of like I'm strong and I'm going to just move past it. Once you actually realize that you've never moved past it and you will never move past it until you fucking actually admit that it happened in the way that it happened, then you kind of, like you were saying, you were on the verge of tears, and I think that's like the start of it. But ultimately, it's sad. It's, you had sadness that you did not. I'm not. Let me just say myself. I had sadness. I don't know about you, but I had a lot of sadness, and I still have a lot of sadness that I still want to distract myself from. And it's important to kind of just allow yourself to fucking.
You have to take it in like stride.
Just just whatever you can think about. That's why a lot of times you can't do it by yourself, because a lot of times it'll become too. You let a little too much out that becomes. You kind of you become like a baby again because you're so vulnerable at that point, but you need someone else who can act as the parent you never had in a way that is supportive and caring and who can also be who accepts your vulnerability. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, you have your wife, and hopefully you guys can talk and talk about these things and or maybe not, but and I'm always down to talk about it, but I think it's very important. One of the things I wanted to mention real quick was there's Stefan Molyneux. I listen to him a lot, and a lot of the self-knowledge stuff comes from listening to him. But there's this whole thing I've learned about, or he's talked about the panic you get when you start to surpass your parents in like a success and like in a moral way, like when you start to realize that your parents were at this level and you're kind of reaching that level and making your way past it, you start to panic because you almost have this instinctual like thought that you can't be not necessarily better than your parents, but that once you get past your parents, you're lost or you're in unknown territory or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know exactly.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of bringing this up because I was thinking about it. But and I get that because I think that at some point, I kind of like, you kind of have, it's like a separation. It's like a separation anxiety from the connection that you had with your parents that wasn't really very strong, because I didn't have a very strong bond, connection, love kind of thing with my parents. So when you kind of realize that, and you realize you're kind of on your own path, or you realize you're doing something completely unknown and very risky and very scary, and you don't have the model for what that looks like, you don't have the model for that success, you start to panic because you don't know what to do with it. So I think that's some of the thing, like that's some of the reason why, like if you had a very unstable childhood and now you're starting to feel the stability, you're starting to live in a world you've never lived in before. You're starting to really, because your body and your mind adapts to its environment. If you adapted to an environment of moving around and instability, it's going to take a while before you can adapt to an environment of stability. And you have to kind of recognize that panic and that fear is because it's unknown, and your body isn't used to that. Your body isn't used to being chill, if that makes sense. Yeah. In a more youthful vernacular.
Oh, thank you. For all the young listeners, they understand what you're saying now because you threw chill.
Sometimes you got to chill. Sometimes you shouldn't be chilling so much. But anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick. So anyway, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. That's really good insight into your life. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Now everybody knows a little deep, dark secret.
It's kind of thing, in a lot of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's like it's kind of daring to not do it anonymously. Like,
yeah, that's why. I mean, when I was doing my notes and stuff, and when I was thinking about saying what I wanted to say, I was like, I like want to be careful. Especially because I'm like speaking about family members and things like that, and I don't like want to paint people in terrible lights that nobody really knows. So,
it's a natural reaction to want to not offend those that were your caregivers.
Most people I don't really fucking care, but like my mother, for example, like
that's
I don't want her to like feel horrible because of what I said, basically. But
well, you can't control the way she feels.
Yeah.
And if it's true, it's true. So I appreciate that you're brave enough to tell the truth, and it's it's the way you feel, and the reason one of the reasons you feel the way you do is because you didn't get to express yourself as a child, and you didn't get to. So I think it's important to not, be honest. Don't try not to embellish too much if you can, and have those conversations with the people who affected you, and really you can talk to her about any of those issues that you need to, and I assume that she would listen to you enough.
Oh yeah, she would.
But I think it's it's still if it's true and it happened to you and you want to share it, I think it's brave to cut down some of those emotional barriers that.
Well, I mean, I feel like if we're talking about self-knowledge, that I want to walk the walk as well as talk about talking the talk, and so that's why I was like, if we're gonna talk about this and we're gonna do this, then I'm gonna take it seriously. And
good. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, very much, because I take it pretty seriously.
But yeah,
cool.
Well, and I feel like it's good for the listeners to know that we're serious. About this topic and not just talking about it because we think it makes us sound fucking smart or something.
It would be easy to look up a bunch of studies, talk about other people's situations, but to be honest about your own insecurities or your own vulnerabilities, I think that's the only real truth anyway. I mean, I could go off about other people's experiences, but that's just bullshit. I am only learning about myself, so I appreciate. I like when I hear other people talking about this stuff, I appreciate it when it seems sincere, and so. I hope that people appreciate it, and if they don't, fuck them, because I don't.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, what are you gonna do? I mean, this is our show; we can do whatever we want. So, we'll be as entertaining as we want, and we'll be as dramatic as we want.
Well, there we go. Well, I think we're due for a stint of some more entertaining, lighthearted topics now.
Sure, and ultimately, look forward to a secret guest star here, or a guest host, a guest person. Coming up soon.
Just a guest spot.
Guest spot. So
spotty guest.
If that's it for you, we can.
Yeah, no, I think self-knowledge has been concluded.
Well,
kind of. It's never ending, really. Yeah. But
I think we'll get into some more stuff again some other time.
I feel like we'll revisit it. I could see us coming back to this, down the road.
Well, if I have
just chatting about it,
if we have like a little, thought we want to get off our head, we'll just talk about it. But
some epiphanies about our own beings.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next week.
Good night and good luck.